Sleepovers are supposed to be safe. They're supposed to be fun. A few best friends, staying up late, whispering secrets in the dark, maybe watching scary movies, but in the end, always knowing that it's all pretend. But in the small town of Henryetta, Oklahoma, one sleepover turned into a tragedy, and by the time it was over, 7 people were dead. This case is every parent's worst nightmare, and by the end of it, you will be second guessing who can we really trust around our children. And this is a case that will truly make you lose faith in the system that is set in place meant to protect us. This was a massacre committed by a monster that should have never been free in the first place, a monster that should have been behind bars when this horrific tragedy took place. And once you hear how this all unfolded, you will never forget about it. My name is Brianna, and I'm hot on the case. I want to talk a little bit about this week's sponsor, Aura. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number or why your inbox is suddenly drowning in spam, this is why. There are companies called data brokers that collect and sell your personal information without your consent. They make billions doing it, selling your data to marketers, scammers, even stalkers. And although they're legally required to remove your information if you ask, they've made the process intentionally confusing and time-consuming, which is why I use and recommend Aura. Aura takes care of the hard part. They automatically remove your personal info from data broker sites and work to keep it off. It's a full all-in-one digital security solution. There are so many features. I get real-time alerts if my info is found on the dark web, fraud notifications from my credit and bank accounts, 24/7 identity monitoring, a secure VPN, antivirus, a password manager, you name it. Plus, if anything goes wrong, you're covered with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance and US-based support 24/7. I recently had an issue with the scammer and it was not fun, which is why I'm happy to now be using Aura to keep my information protected. You can try Aura free for 14 days at aura.com/hotonthecase. In those 2 weeks, you'll discover why your information is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and neither should you. Holly Guess was 35 years old, living in the small city of Henryetta, Oklahoma. She was the mom to 3 teenagers, 2 daughters, and 1 son. 17-year-old Riley Allen, 15-year-old Michael Mayo, and her youngest daughter, 13-year-old Tiffany Guess. All 3 of Holly's kids had different biological fathers, but they all referred to Holly's youngest, Tiffany's dad, Joe, as their father. Joe came into Riley's life when she was only 1 year old, and when he met Holly, she was already pregnant with Michael, so he was in Michael's entire life. Joe really was the epitome of not just a stepfather, but the father that stepped up. But unfortunately, after 13 years of marriage, Holly and Joe divorced, but he was still very much in the lives of all 3 of his children, and he actually had plans to officially adopt Riley and Michael despite no longer being with their mom. And after Holly and Joe split up, they agreed if either of them ever got involved with someone new, that person had to be vetted. They agreed. Background checks were a must before anyone new was brought into their kids' lives. And then in 2021, Holly started dating a new guy, 37-year-old Jesse McFadden. And in the beginning of this case, it wasn't actually known how the two met, but once they met and started dating, things moved really, really fast. Very quickly, Jesse was living with Holly and her 3 kids, and the couple were married only a year later in 2022. And Holly assured Joe that Jesse's background check came back clean. On the surface, everything seemed fine. Holly and Jesse seemed like a nice, normal couple, the kind of couple that you would wave to on the sidewalk. Holly would bake treats for all the neighbors. Jesse showed up to the kids' sporting events. There were no red flags, at least not on the outside. And then on the weekend of April 29th, 2023, Holly's youngest, 13-year-old Tiffany, wanted to have a slumber party with some of her close friends at her house. Nothing, out of the ordinary. Tiffany's slumber party wasn't going to be a big event. She invited over a handful of her closest friends. Some of them were not able to make it, but two of her closest friends could, 14-year-old Ivy Webster and 15-year-old Brittany Brewer. Ivy lived right down the block. Her family and Tiffany's family were close, the kind of neighborhood friendship where the kids came and went between houses like they lived at both. Tiffany was a regular fixture in the Webster household. And Brittany Brewer was no stranger either. She'd been over at Tiffany's plenty of times, and her dad said the same thing that a lot of people said about the guest household, that Holly was a warm, welcoming, nice mother, and Jesse, her new husband, came off as a typical stepdad, polite, involved, nothing stood out. On Saturday, April 29th, Jesse McFadden picked up Ivy and Brittany to take them to the sleepover at the guest's home. That night, Jesse took all three girls out first to the mall and then to a place called Main Event, which was like the teen cool hangout spot. It had bowling, a few restaurants, arcade games, laser tag. By all accounts, it looked like a typical Saturday girls' night out. Throughout the night, Ivy kept in touch with her mom through mostly Snapchat. There was nothing alarming, nothing out of the ordinary. Everything seemed fine. And by the next morning, Sunday, April 30th, everything still seemed fine. Ivy and Brittany were supposed to be back by 5 p.m., but sometime during the afternoon, both girls texted their parents saying that there was a change of plans. Tiffany's stepdad, Jesse McFadden, had this property, a ranch in McAllister that he rented. McAllister was a rural town nearby, and they were all going to go to this ranch to do some swimming, and then they were going to head home. So, okay, fine, it's not something that the parents had planned, but again, nothing sounded sinister. The girls followed up late in the day with another text. They told their parents that they were running late, leaving McAllister, but they would be home soon. Only they did not ever come home. And as the hours ticked by, both families started trying to reach their daughters, calling, texting, waiting. No answers, no updates. And this was a school night. Monday morning was coming fast and neither girl had come home. Still, both of their parents tried to remain calm, thinking of, everything but the worst case scenario. Maybe they lost service. Maybe the car had some kind of trouble. Maybe their phones had died. But by early the next morning, Monday, May 1st, Ivy and Brittany still weren't home and they never made it to school. And that's when both families did what no parent ever wants to do. They reported their daughters as missing persons. That Monday morning, the same day Ivy and Brittany were reported missing, Jesse McFadden was supposed to appear in court, not as a witness, not on jury duty, but as the defendant. His trial was set to begin for 2 felony charges, and he never showed up. Jesse McFadden was a wanted man who had no business being around children. And suddenly, this wasn't just a case about 2 missing teenage girls, it was something much darker. And when police finally obtained a search warrant and arrived at Jesse McFadden's property in rural Okmulgee County, what they found wasn't a quiet home where kids had just spent the weekend laughing and playing. They found 7 dead bodies. The case of 2 missing teenage girls just turned into a massacre. Amongst the victims were all 3 of Holly Guess's children, Riley, Michael, and Tiffany. Holly was also found dead as well. So were Ivy Webster and Brittany Brewer. And at the end, Jesse McFadden was discovered dead as well, from what authorities later confirmed was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Jesse McFadden had killed his wife and all 3 of her children, as well as Tiffany's 2 friends who thought they were just coming over for an innocent sleepover. The bodies of Michael, Tiffany, and Holly were found not too far outside the home, and the bodies of Riley, Ivy, and Brittany were found a quarter-mile away from the home in a wooded area. They all had gunshot wounds to their head, and it was unclear to authorities if their bodies had been staged or if they were shot running away from their killer. And after killing a mother and 5 children, Jesse McFadden turned the weapon on himself. The man who had blended so seamlessly into this neighborhood, into this family's lives, who baked cookies with Holly, who cheered at the kids' sporting games, who took 3 teenage girls to the mall and out for pizza, was hiding a violent criminal history that no one saw coming. And the system that should have kept him ever from getting close to children failed catastrophically. So let's dive into who Jesse McFadden really was. After dropping out of high school his freshman year, he immediately turned to a life of crime. At first, it was petty things. Underage drinking, driving on a suspended license, nothing major, at least not yet, because by 2002, Jesse was only 18 years old when he was charged with felony grand larceny after stealing over $80,000 from his own grandfather. And by the next year, his crimes escalated again, this time even more violent and darker. In 2003, Jesse was charged with the violent sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl. Her name was Crystal. Crystal and Jesse had only met through a girl that Jesse was dating. They weren't close friends. They barely knew each other. They were barely acquaintances. By November of that year, the two just so happened to run into each other at a party. And according to Crystal, they exchanged a quick hi, in passing, barely even, did a little small talk. That was it. Nothing that would ever suggest what was going to happen next. Later that night, hours after Crystal had already left the party, gone home and gone to bed, around 3 a.m., Crystal was jolted awake by loud banging at her front door. It was Jesse. He was upset, emotional. He told Crystal that his girlfriend had just broken up with him and he didn't know what to do. And Crystal herself, she's confused and uncomfortable because remember, her and Jesse don't really know each other and she doesn't know how this is any of her problem. So she tries to shut the door, tell Jesse to go home and send him on his way, but Jesse forced himself in the door. And then he found whatever he could in Crystal's place and he bound and gagged Crystal with whatever he could find. And at knife point, with a knife to Crystal's neck, Jesse sexually assaulted her. And after it was over, Jesse started to panic. I guess he realized that he was going to jail. He started threatening Crystal to keep quiet, to keep this all a secret, and as he was ordering her to wash herself up and clean any evidence of her own assault, she was able to make a run for it. She ran out the back door completely naked and ran to a neighbor's for help. Jesse was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison for the assault. And while I was researching this, I was like, there's no way that this is his first time committing a crime like this. It's too planned and too violent. It doesn't seem like a first-time offender of a sex crime. And turns out I was right, because we did get confirmation that this wasn't his first time committing a crime like this. While he was in prison, another girl confided in Crystal that he had done this to her years earlier. And it wouldn't surprise me if there were even more victims out there. Only 1 year into his sentence, he wrote a letter to the judge begging for leniency. He wanted a lighter sentence. He claimed that he was changed, that he was a better person. The judge denied this request, and he was meant to stay in prison until he was 40 years old. And Jesse claiming that he was changed and a better person was total bullshit, because while he was behind bars for assaulting a 16-year-old girl, Jesse McFadden was able to reoffend. In 2016, 13 years into his 20-year prison sentence, he was caught in prison with a contraband cell phone, and he was caught after the prison received a tip from a man who found sexually explicit texts, letters, pictures, and videos between Jesse, a man in his 30s, and this guy's 16-year-old granddaughter named Caitlin. And Jesse 100% knew that Caitlin was an underage girl because really early into their communications that lasted about 1.5 years, he asked her to send something to verify her age, and she sent him a photo of her learner's permit. But what I don't get is, why is he asking, to confirm her age if her being underage is no problem to him at all? Jesse lied to this teenage girl, Caitlin. He manipulated her. He said that the only reason that he was in prison was all a misunderstanding. He groomed her. He manipulated her, this young girl, into thinking that they were in love, that they were in a relationship, that once he was out of prison, they were going to have this great life together. He was going to turn his life around and they were going to get married. Now, because he reoffended in 2017, Jesse was charged with 2 additional felonies, one for sexting a minor and one for being in possession of child content, like CP. And despite literally reoffending, being caught having an inappropriate relationship with a 16-year-old girl while he's in prison, serving a sentence for sexually assaulting another 16-year-old girl in October of 2020, Jesse McFadden was released 3 years early on good behavior. It really makes your blood boil. How was he able to be released early, 17 years into his 20-year sentence after committing such heinous crimes against a teenage girl? And while he's serving that sentence, he's caught having a relationship with another minor. And he was still able to be released early. And one of the reasons cited for his early release was good behavior. It's appalling. And when Jesse was released from prison, it wasn't on parole or, probation. When he was released, his sentence was considered served. And without a parole hearing or anything, his original victim, Crystal, wasn't even given the chance to tell the parole board why she thought that he was a danger to society and why he should not be able to be released early. And actually, when the decision was made to release Jesse McFadden early, they did not even tell Crystal. They didn't even let her know. And I would say, I can't even believe this, but this case has truly made me lose faith in the justice system on every single level. And Crystal was scared that when Jesse McFadden was released one day, that he might come after her. So the fact that they didn't even give her a heads up that it was happening 3 years early. But Jesse McFadden was released early. And other than having to register as a sex offender and have a check-in every 3 months, Jesse McFadden was a free man. And he was able to start a relationship with Holly, marry her, move in with her 3 underage children. And I'm sure that at this point you might be a little confused because I told you in the beginning that Holly and Joe had that deal. If they ever started dating anyone, they would have to, vet them with a background check. And Holly told Joe that Jesse's background check came up clean. And we know that would be a lie, and I will get into that in just a second and explain that all. But first, I want to talk about Joe for a second. Joe found out that his 3 children were murdered on Facebook. No one from the sheriff's office even had the decency to give him a call and let him know. And I have a clip from an interview that he did, and I want to share parts with you. It's heart-shattering, but I think it's important for you guys to truly see what the failed justice system costs these families.
I am just so sorry for you and what your family is dealing with and going through. Have you heard any more information or details from authorities about this crime?
No, I've got one phone call, and that phone call was yesterday saying they found 7 bodies, and that's the only thing I've heard.
Who was it that made that phone call?
It was some investigator down there at the property, but that's all I know.
And an investigator was able to inform you of the fate of your daughter?
They said just 7 victims. They didn't tell me who it was.
How did you find out?
Facebook, the news online, and Holly's mother finally said or posted that it was the kids when they said on there confirmed.
So you've had no outreach, no contact from authorities in any way, even just for emotional support in this terrible crime?
No, not at all.
I am so sorry to hear that, Joe. Did you know anything about this perpetrator, this stepfather of Tiffany's, Jesse McFadden? Did you know anything about his history as a registered?
No, because my daughter would not have spent a second in the house. I would have brought the whole damn police force with me, or I would have drug him out by the nape of his head.
Holly never mentioned anything at all to you about this.
No, the only thing we ever talked about was at the beginning of their relationship, we had an understanding that no one would be around the kids unless we both agreed upon it, and we did a background check, and we were okay with it. I asked if there was a background check. She said yes, nothing was there.
So you were lied to about the background, because as we're learning now from the children's grandmother, Jan Mayo, Holly did find out about the criminal background, but unfortunately, this
She was lied to
beast,
herself.
Jesse McFadden hired an actress to lie to her to say that she was the victim and that it was all a misunderstanding. Do you think that's why Holly didn't tell you?
I don't know. I know that from the bottom of my heart, I know that if any one of them would have told me anything, I would have been there. Period. I'd have been there. I don't care. Ex-wife, not. I'd have been there.
What was your last communication with your daughter, Tiffany?
It was last Thursday. I talked with her a little bit as I was talking with Holly. The kids were talking to me in the background. All the kids. I don't care. The older two aren't biologically mine, but I was there since Riley was 1, and Michael James wasn't even born, and we were married 13 years.
Those are all his kids. They all look to him as daddy.
So this is an additional blow. I didn't know that. I didn't know you had a close relationship with the other kids, Riley and Michael, and you had a chance to speak on the phone?
Yeah. And matter of fact, it wasn't even a few months ago, me and Holly were still talking about possibilities of me going through the legal system and still adopting the older two.
Even though she had married Jesse McFadden?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts as to why she might have been thinking that you could adopt the children when she was married to someone else?
Because we've been working on it for over 10 years.
They loved him. They didn't look at nobody else as their daddy. This is their daddy right here.
They came to me the last season of During Track and was like, Dad, we know you're not our biological dad, but we don't care. You're our dad.
So Riley and Michael called you dad as well?
Yes.
They did.
I am just so sorry for what you're going through. This is just, it's such a tremendous, I mean, it's an unimaginable loss, that what's happened. At this point, do you hold anyone responsible for having let Jesse McFadden out of prison? It looks like 3 years early, while a crime had been committed in prison, a crime that was similar to the crime he committed that got him into prison.
Yeah, he never should have been let out. The legal system completely failed. And not to mention, where's the sign? Where's the pink light? Where's all the indicators of somebody that's supposed to be a
Somebody dropped the ball. Joe was kept in the dark. He didn't know anything about this guy's past. We didn't know anything about this guy's past until yesterday when it started popping up. And we're learning more and more about it in real time right now on the interviews you're doing, that people that knew about it, but yet for months and kept it privileged to their little circle and didn't tell Joe anything about it.
It might have been new information tonight that this hired an actress to tell your ex-wife and the mother of your kids that there was no that she was the pretend victim and that it was all a misunderstanding.
I never knew Holly found out anything, and I never knew about a lie. I never knew about portraying nothing. I never knew about any of it.
When they found out what the public record was, and they knew that he wasn't, knew that he had been in jail for all those years, somebody should have told this man so he could protect his daughter and his kids. All three is his kids.
What would you like, Joe? What would you like us to all know about all three of those kids, Riley, Michael, and your daughter, Tiffany?
Well, they were taken from me too soon, but the best moments of my life. My oldest Riley was amazing, great artist. All the time asking if she could just draw me something. My son, always excited about showing me a new video game and talking for hours about video games and engineering and building this and building that. My youngest, straight A student, most amazing, sweet, kind person. Doesn't matter where I'm at, what I'm doing, she'll come running and jump in my arms. Daddy.
Track
And
star.
I'll never get it again.
Daddy's girl. Track star. Fun-loving kids, man. Fun-loving good kids.
To say that the ball was dropped on every single level of this case would be a massive understatement. There are still so many unanswered questions in this case, especially in the early days of the case. There were so many unanswered questions, but we do know some things now. But when it comes to the motive, why Jesse killed his wife, his 3 stepchildren, and 2 innocent friends, Ivy and Brittany, and then himself, that's still unknown to this day. But I think it's pretty safe to assume that at least a little bit of the reason was because Jesse McFadden did not want to go back to prison. Jesse McFadden was facing 20 more years behind bars for the crimes that he committed during his first 20-year-long sentence. That tragic Monday morning, when the mass murders that he committed were discovered, Jesse was set to go to court. He had a hearing. It would be the beginning of his new trial where he was facing an additional 20 years. These crimes that he committed while he was in prison happened in 2016, but his trial was delayed over and over and over again, but it was finally supposed to start that fateful Monday morning. The night before that Monday morning, Jesse used a fake Facebook account to message his 2016 victim, Caitlin, and he tried to blame her for the 6 murders that he had either just committed or was about to commit because she refused to drop the charges against him. In this message, he sent Caitlin a selfie along with the following messages. I did exactly what I promised I would do when I got out. I got a marketing job, making great money, and was being advanced. Been there 2 years now, made a great life like I promised I would do with you. Now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't go back. This is all on you for continuing this. And obviously, it goes without saying that this girl, Caitlin, is not at all responsible for the horrific things that Jesse McFadden did to a mother and 5 children. She was incredibly brave to plan to go to court that day and face her abuser. She said that she thought doing this, she was going to be protecting other people. And at the very minimum, Jesse alone is to blame for the deaths of 5 children and 1 mother. Ivy, Brittany, Tiffany, Michael, Riley, and Holly. But if we're going to put blame on anyone else, it would be every system and every person that put Jesse back on the streets when it was clear that he was still a danger to society. And given how badly this case was mishandled from the start, you'd hope that maybe going forward, now that this is a mass murder investigation where a mother and 5 children were killed, because I cannot say it enough, that investigators in the justice system would have taken a much closer look at the case moving forward. But unfortunately, you would be wrong, and the ball would be dropped yet again, because within days of this mass murder taking place, the crime scene was opened back up for the victims' families, and they were able to walk through the home where their children's lives were taken. And this is when their parents discovered just how horrific this crime really was, and also found uncollected evidence that the investigators carelessly left behind. It's almost like the investigators believed because their suspect was dead that the families didn't deserve any answers. The families of these victims were told before they entered this house that the investigators had found only 2 cell phones. and also that the investigators had bagged up any other relevant evidence that they had found throughout the house, but that just was not the case. Ivy Webster's own family not only found their daughter's cell phone, but multiple other cell phones, a few laptops, and that was just the beginning of it. In this home, multiple beds had restraints, chains, and fresh locks still attached to them. The counter island in the kitchen had a chain and locks bolted into the middle of it. Throughout the entire home, there was bondage and torture devices, adult toys, and drug paraphernalia that was just left behind by the investigators for the families of Ivy and Brittany to just find it themselves. And the families, luckily, filmed themselves doing this walkthrough, and I'm going to show you parts of that footage now. I'm just going to let you know that if you're watching the video version on YouTube or on Spotify, quick warning, this video is very disturbing and deeply emotional.
Phone or phone case.
Thursday afternoon, News 4 was invited by Webster and his family to take a closer look at where his daughter took her last breath. Behind these walls, the family found sex and bondage devices. In one of the bedrooms were restraints bolted into the bed frame. There was also a shelf filled with books about witchcraft. 10 feet away in the kitchen, another restraint with chains and locks still attached. Although there were reportedly 4 bodies found in this home, we didn't see any bloodstains, no blood splatters. In the back room, the most shocking find of it all, crucial items that had not been collected.
That's them. Hey, that's them.
Okay,
That's
is that hers?
Yep. Okay. Hold on.
Call the sheriff.
Yep.
Don't touch them. Don't move them.
Ivy Webster's cell phone was tucked away in a laundry room cabinet, along with 2 other cell phones and 2 laptops.
There you go.
Pictures were snapped and the items finally collected, but not without a brief explanation as to why it hadn't been done before.
I want more done.
The problem is, we don't know what else to do. Like,
There's a story to be told here.
right.
We don't know what happened.
Don't know what
exactly.
else to do. I'm going to say
And
this.
since we don't have the only person that can tell us what happened,
Is dead, but we can try to piece it together.
And I'm going to say this was not done right. No crime scene tape.
we are open to any suggestions you all can
I'm saying
give.
this. They didn't do their job, and the whole world's going to know it.
But what would this accomplish?
I'm a grieving parent that my daughter got raped and murdered, and you're telling me right now that I don't have a right to know what happened? The story's right here. It's right here. And it's still sitting here. Still!
Disgusted with the investigation into his daughter's murder, he only saw more uncollected evidence on his walkout. Another phone in the top drawer of a nightstand, several computer towers, and a check made out to a local storage company still sitting in plain sight.
The family even found a receipt that showed that Jesse McFadden had bought those fresh locks on the restraints just a few days earlier, so it proved that this was likely premeditated. No one in Ivy or Brittany's families had any idea who Jesse McFadden really was, and if they had, there's no way they would have let their daughters spend the night at his home. But how could they have possibly known? These families weren't sending their children to a stranger's house. They knew Holly. They knew her kids. You'd never expect that a mother would allow a registered sex offender around her own children, let alone invite other people's kids in that home without so much as a warning, a heads up. Because you want to believe at the very least, no parent would put other parents' children in danger like that. But unfortunately, it came out in the investigation that Holly was aware of Jesse's background and that his background check did not come back clean. Holly's own parents, the grandparents of Tiffany, Michael, and Riley, one day were doing a background check on one of their coworkers, and they just so happened to come across Jesse's criminal history. They confronted their daughter, and according to Holly's mother, Jesse had allegedly hired an actress to pretend to be his victim and go to Holly and explain that this was all a miscommunication, that it was one of those situations where he was 18 and she was 17 and her parents had pressed charges or something, and that was it. saying, I say allegedly because there is no proof that this actually happened. And if an actress really did take that job, shame on her. But I don't know if I really believe the story that Holly told her parents about him hiring an actress or whatever, because in the investigation, it came out that Holly met Jesse while he was still in prison through some kind of inmate pen pal situation. Jesse's own cellmate did an interview confirming it. Take a listen.
Well, yeah, of course. We stopped being cellmates in 2015, and even throughout the rest of my incarceration, and then whenever I got out of prison, I kept up with him. I was looking on the Oklahoma State Court Network to see when he was going to have to face, the charges that he got while he was at that other prison. I was, looking up to see where he lived. That's how I found out him and Holly got married. I was looking up to see, if he had faced these charges that he was accused of, that he was guilty of. And I saw their marriage certificate, and it just blew my mind. I don't know why they would let him out of prison, why they didn't just take him straight to county jail and await those charges.
And I know you're upset because you reached out to police to, let them know that this was it was nerve-wracking that you couldn't even see where he was registered. And then ultimately after the killings, you let them know how upset you were. The one thing that I just want to let our viewers know about is that you actually had quite a deep connection to Holly, his wife, who he just murdered, along with her 3 kids and their 2 friends. You used to be a pen pal of hers when you were incarcerated. She told you that she loved him. Or she told you that she loved you. And then on February 20th and February 21st, you had this text exchange with her, still as a friend, saying, hey, and she texted back, hi, how are you? And you said, doing great, finally enjoying my life. I see you have a different last name. And then she says, yeah, me and Jesse got married. And you say, how are the kids? And she says, they're great and huge, LOL. So clearly you had a good relationship with her. This must be devastating, this news that not only Holly, but her 3 children are dead.
Yeah, I just feel like this definitely should not have happened. It definitely should have been avoided. After I had that text exchange with her, I contacted the police department where their marriage, out of the city where their marriage certificate was listed as. And of course, he wasn't on the registry, so I contacted them. I say, hey, there's an offender in your area. He's not on the registry. They say, well, the state has a public list. And I went and checked that list, couldn't find him, got back to him, said, hey, this guy's a predator. He has multiple offenses, just trying to warn him, just wanted to say something. I couldn't say much to her because I didn't know if he read her text messages. I didn't want him to see them and hurt her, the exchanges between us. I just wanted to keep it, straight, friendly. But, when I reached out to the law enforcement and they didn't get back with me, I was just like, what the heck, man?
And I really don't want to make it seem like during this video that I am victim shaming Holly at all. It's completely possible that she was truly manipulated by Jesse. And trust me, there is enough criticism of Holly out there already, but the facts are the facts. Holly knew that Jesse had this criminal history. She knew that he was supposed to be a registered sex offender. She allowed him to move in. She lied to her children's father and also allowed the children of other parents to come over and sleep under the same roof. Another thing that came out in the investigation was apparently being a disgusting monster was something that was just in Jesse McFadden's blood. Because at the time that he committed this heinous, horrific crime, at the time that he killed 6 people, his younger brother was in prison for something pretty similar. His younger brother, Cody McFadden, had a long rap sheet himself, but in July of 2022, he kidnapped his ex-girlfriend, put her in a dog cage where he used jumper cables to electrocute her for 36 hours. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison. And when the autopsy results came back for each of Jesse's victims, it showed that each of them had been shot in the head, but Holly, Michael, and Tiffany had been shot multiple times. And there was evidence of sexual assault on Ivy and Brittany. They had what has been described as blunt force injuries to their private parts. And as more of this story began to unravel, that Jesse McFadden wasn't just dangerous, that he reoffended while behind bars and was still somehow released early with almost no supervision, the public was furious, outraged, and rightfully so. People wanted answers. How did this happen? Why was a violent offender given the benefit of the doubt? And what was going to be done to make sure that something like this never happened again? Because here's the bottom line. Jesse McFadden should have still been in prison. If he was never released early, this crime would have never happened. He should have still been in jail the day that he killed 6 people. So, with pressure mounting and outrage building, the county's DA finally came forward and made a public statement, trying to explain, or at least answer for, some of the decisions that led to this tragedy.
Being the DA of Muskogee County, honestly, I accept responsibility for that. Even though I was not here for most of that time period, ultimately it's my responsibility. One of the most disappointing factors in this case was we let this case to go on as long as it did. And that's unacceptable. It just is.
In retrospect, do you feel like things should have been done differently with this case?
Absolutely. There are a lot of things. I mean, as many people have said, the justice system broke on this case, and it did. But I have second-guessed myself all week long about what I could have done or should have done differently. And it's been tough. It's been really tough.
Ivy's mother, Ashley Webster, has been very vocal online, specifically on TikTok, advocating for her daughter and for reform, and she's been incredibly vulnerable in doing so. I first heard of this case back in August of last year, I believe, when Ivy's mother, Ashley, posted the Ring camera footage on TikTok of the moment that she found out that her 14-year-old daughter was dead.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! What happened? Mom is dead!
At the end of the day, we will never have all the answers to this case. There will always be unanswered questions. We don't even know what day this happened. We don't know in what order Holly, her children, Ivy, and Brittany were killed. We don't know what they endured before they died and why he chose to do this and why the system allowed this to happen. And while grieving such terrible loss, the victims' families have tried to get change in the system to ensure that this never happens again. So they created Knight's Law 2.0, a proposed law that's named after the mascot of the school that the kids went to. It is a direct response to the systematic failures that allowed a convicted sex offender like Jesse McFadden to slip through the cracks and reoffend with devastating consequences. Created by the families of the victims in the Henryetta, Oklahoma tragedy, this petition is calling for real, meaningful change to protect children and hold predators fully accountable. At its core, the law proposes that anyone convicted of a sex crime against a child should serve their entire prison sentence. No parole, no early release, no second chances. It also demands that sex offenders who fail to register face felony charges, and repeat offenders are subjected to mandatory electronic monitoring. Knight's Law would require that all child sex crime investigations be handled by highly trained state or federal agencies to ensure that no detail is overlooked. It also seeks to hold the justice system accountable by enforcing victim notification when their offender is released, and punish officials who fail to follow through. Another key part of the proposal includes real-time alerts for communities when a registered sex offender moves into their area, complete with detailed info and photos. This includes landlords making all tenants aware of any sex offenders in the area before they sign a lease, as well as real estate agents disclosing any sex offenders in the area before they buy a home. It also pushes for criminal charges against any parent or guardian who knowingly allows a convicted sex offender access to children. Background checks will be required on all marriage applications, and those applications to be denied if the non-offender entering the marriage has underage children. This law was passed in the House of Representatives, but it was stalled in the Senate, with one of the reasons being costs. You gotta ask the American government, what do you think is the appropriate price tag on children's safety? But still, the families are still fighting to have this law passed, and there's a petition that you can sign to help make that happen. We talk a lot about justice in the true crime community, but every now and then, there's a case that comes along where you can actually do something, and this is one of those times. The families affected by this tragedy aren't just grieving, they're fighting. They're fighting for accountability, for change, and for a system that stops protecting predators, but they can't do it alone. If this case has moved you, if you felt even a tiny bit of heartbreak and anger, signing the petition linked below is a small action, but it sends a powerful message. We're paying attention, and we expect better. Let's not just be true crime viewers. Let's be true crime advocates. Add your voice, stand with the families, and demand change. I know the viewership that my podcast gets across all platforms. If even half of you go and sign this petition, it can make real change. As it stands, the Knight's Law petition currently has 46,674 signatures. I will link the petition in the bio of this video podcast across all platforms. It'll be in the link tree in the bio of my Instagram and TikTok. So as my audience, it would mean the world to me if you're able to take a second out of your day and go help these families. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. To close out this case today, I want to share a little bit about each of the victims of today's case. According to her mother, 35-year-old Holly Guess was all parent. She was a great mom who was overly protective and supported her kids throughout everything. 17-year-old Riley Allen was incredibly artistic. She was a great painter, and she was looking forward and completely planned to continue to refine her craft. And one day, she wanted to be a doctor. 15-year-old Michael Mayo loved video games, but really shined athletically. He did it all: football, track, and cross country. His younger sister, 13-year-old Tiffany Guess, also followed in her brother's footsteps. She joined cross country. She had also recently tried out for cheerleading. She got straight A's, and she loved to sing. 15-year-old Brittany Brewer was incredibly outgoing. She sang in our church's choir, and she really, really loved her church. She was awarded Miss Henryetta and dreamed of being a teacher or a vet when she grew up. 14-year-old Ivy Webster was her mother's best friend and only daughter. She loved softball and animals. She wanted to work with animals one day. She was an incredibly sweet girl. She loved horror movies, and she couldn't wait to travel one day, and she will never get the chance. This wasn't just a crime. It was a complete collapse of a system that was meant to keep children safe. It was preventable, and yet a convicted predator was given the benefit of the doubt, early release, and a second chance when 5 children were never even given their first chance. Riley, Michael, Tiffany, Ivy, Brittany, Holly, they were people and they were loved. They had their entire lives ahead of them, and their names should not just be remembered as a headline in a long list of systemic failures. What happened in that house was more than a tragedy. It was a warning, and if nothing changes, if no one listens, what's stopping it from happening again? Justice shouldn't be optional. Accountability shouldn't only come after something like this happens. And the lives lost deserve more than silence. They deserve action. So again, please, if you have a chance, check out the petition I have linked in my bio. In any way you can to help this video, this case get out to more people. Share the case, share the video. The more you interact with the video on YouTube, with the podcast, the more they will push it out to more people. And if you watched the end of this video and listened to Riley, Michael, Tiffany, Ivy, Brittany, and Holly's story, thank you so much. It means the world to me. And I hope you guys all have a happy and safe Friday. And I will see you guys all next time when we are hot in the case once again.